So this is the third video in the series. So in the first one, I introduced you to the custom logger that we have and a simple how do you create a worker in Vite and that in a method where it can be built and actually, you can preview the build and then throw it on a web server and everything should work okay in that. So we have the same thing in this code example. Everything's the same up to it's about to change after line 39 and that. So before we just had two functions in our worker. We had the on message, which in this case we're going to start using like a dispatcher. That's the first point of contact, and then it's going to basically send the message off to different functions depending. So then we're going to have to build a mechanism to say, hey, which function do you want, and how are we going to send the data, and that sort of thing. So this is what some test messages that we can send. So all this is the same in here. None of this has really changed adding the event listeners. But here we're going to create work for the worker to do, the concept. And so we're going to send a little object over, and one property is going to be called invoke. And I'm kind of following the pattern that I saw in the ArcGIS web, I guess, workers framework in that. So invoke means I want to run the hello function, and here are the arguments. And so if we keep our object simple, it'll always be invoke args. Our args will always be an array, even if it's just one thing in it. And then that's sort of like a standard way. So invoke will be the name of the function to run. Args will be the parameters that you feed the function, or the arguments, depending on your perspective. And so here I have another one, invoke junk, didn't send any arguments, my array's empty. But this is how it's always going to be. It'll always be invoke args, invoke args. Now this gets to this concept, right? I think that Renee mentioned. JavaScript is Play-Doh. Well, what do you want to do, right? And so this is how I want to set it up. Very generic, object literal, that it'll have the name of the function to run and the parameters, and they could be blank, and that sort of thing. And so I got another run do work. Do work's actually going to do something on these values, and maybe we can get the data back and see them changed. And so if we can put data in, change it, and get that changed data back, now we got something happening, right? And that sort of thing. And then I just, again, to communicate to the worker, it's, hey, post message work to do 1, post message work to do 2, post message work to do 3. Just send them all, fire them all off, boom, boom, boom. Those will all go into on message on the worker side, and then it'll take a look at what you sent, and then it will say, okay, I'll run this function with this data kind of concept. Now this is us just coming up with something, right? Pulling something out of somewhere, right? Or a rabbit out of a hat, or other things in that. So we got to come up with a mechanism. It's pretty clean. Hey, this function, here's the with this data, and that kind of concept. So I'm kind of good with that. That's enough. And then this part is pretty, hey, just fire them all off. Now when the data comes back, we're going to come up with a concept, right? Is that we want to have lots of messages happening in this case, between the main thread and the worker. Now some of them just might be informational. Some of them might be like a warning. Hey, we don't have something with that name. Some of them might be, critical, like there was a failure, something broke. Another one might be, hey, the processing was successful. And another one might be, okay, this is the data. So we need a way to distinguish, is this just an information message coming back from the worker? Is this about the data successfully being processed? Is it the actual data that we're looking for? So again, we're going to have a little bit up, go into Play-Doh mode and come up with a mechanism on the worker side to ship back the result. And we'll need to check to say, okay, well, what came back? Was it just a simple message about, hey, we started processing? Like I said, if you ever look at the geoprocessing tools in Arc Pro, you'll see lots of messages coming back via the execution about, hey, cracking the features, hey, doing the intersects, and that sort of thing. And then it'll message, hey, it was successful, and then your data comes back at the end. So similar concepts that we've seen. So let's go over to the worker before we get into lines 57 and that. and on the other side. So this is where onMessage has to get a little bit more complicated. Okay. So if it's a function that we know of, we've got a function called hello, so we can run it. And we got a function called do work, and we'll run it. And they're basically the same. Hey, if it's hello, run the hello function with the args. If it's do work, run the do function with the args. Else, we got a problem, right? We're not going to blow anything up. We're going to warning. We don't have a, you told us to run this function, but we don't have it, right? And that sort of thing. And so we'll just send a message back, right? And this is the first, I guess, view of what are we going to send back. We're going to send back some Play-Doh, and we're going to come up with, hey, what kind of, we're going to have this concept of, there's lots of different message types, almost like states that you see in Calcite Design System, right? Is this an info state? Is it like a warning state, failure, critical state, successful state? We're going to have different types of messages. So some of them will be info. This is a warning one in that. And we're, hey, warning, we don't have a function with that name, right? Maybe there's a small typo or something like that. In that, but at least people will know that, hey, we actually didn't have a function with that name. They could look, oh, I didn't type things right or something in that. Now here's the hello, really simple, but different. We've structured it to give it some structure. So now instead of just a dumb string, it's a smarter string. Hey, it's a type of success, right? It's successful. Because that might tie into using different color schemes in Calcite or something. But now we can say, hey, these messages, we can kind of parse that, hey, this is info, warning, success, failure. It's the actual data. So this is just us coming up with a scheme to say, hey, we're going to have these words, and this is what they mean. In that, so a message of type warning is different than a message of type success, but this is just something that we're cooking up on the fly in Play-Doh mode and that sort of thing. And maybe it becomes a standard that we use throughout our applications eventually. Now, do work actually does something, right, in that. And so it sends all types of different messages back. So it's just saying, hey, this is just an info message to let you know processing has started, that sort of thing. In that. And then I'm going to take the data that you sent me via args, and I'm going to add 2 to whatever the first argument is, add 0.5 to the second argument in that. And then we're going to, just for fun, this is more of a fun thing, we're going to have a different type of message called progress, right? And this would be the concept where you want to tell the main thread, hey, we're 5% done, 10% done, 20% done, 30% done, like a progress bar. And so that's a different type of message, right? So that's different than info. It's different than a warning. It's like, here's a value that you might need to put into a progress bar or maybe into a loader in determinant mode. And so this is trying to set up a play well or be friendly with existing web components. That a lot of progress bars need a value. It's usually between 0 and 100 to figure out. Some of them need it like it's a fractional thing between 0 and 1 in that. So you just got to look at your loader and figure out. You might have to adjust the value on the fly. Now, I did have to do like a little sleep thing happening because it happens way too fast. So we're going to sleep for 50 milliseconds before we fire off the loop again. Now, if we did this on the main thread, our app would lock up, in all honesty. The DOM wouldn't be updated. So if you're in a for loop on the main thread, that for loop has priority. It's got to execute as fast as it can, and the fastest way is not to update the interface. So all interface updates come later. But if you want to have a progress bar showing the % done, then you need to update the interface. And this is where you get into web workers and you got to separate them. So the web worker gets tied up, but not your interface, and allows you to actually update it and that sort of thing. And here is a nice sequence where you see, hey, we're sending an info message, a progress message, a success message, and a result message. So you'd have to come up with a scheme. Like if you're just going to send strings, then it's really hard to figure out, well, what's going on, right? Here we're going to, make these smart strings or smart messages. Some of them are strings. Some of them are just like a value between 0 and 100 to do progress. Some of them will be the actual data going back, which could be, like args, right? Args came in, send args back. So send an array back with whatever data is available, I guess, and that sort of thing. And that's another thing too. Are we going to do when we send the data back, is it one thing, or are we going to allow for many things? And if it's many things, is it just a simple array? And if it has one thing in it, it has one thing in it, right? These are all decisions you can have to make. But these lines here give you an idea of, we're going to like parse out whether this is an info message or progress message. And I did have to send a progress message at 100 because this ends at 99, so my bar didn't fill up all the way and that sort of thing. But we need that ability to, the concept of, hey, there's different types of messages. But this isn't a crazy concept, right? Because we have info messages and warning messages and error messages and success messages. We have these states that we see in calcite design, and they've been in user interfaces Java for a long time, right? So these are like well-known states where you're info versus warning in that. And we're just going to extend that to say, well, sometimes our messages is how much we got done, and sometimes, hey, this is the data coming back. Now, if we're going to send these different types of messages back, we need a little bit of logic on the other side to actually say, well, what kind of message came back? Because maybe we want to do something different in that. And this is where we get into this next section, right? In that. And so if it's an info message, hey, just log it out, done. If it's a warning message, log it out slightly different with a warning. And we'll see the difference here because this is actually, playing well with the browser and that they do different things in the console if you send a warning in that. If it's success, just log it out. But it might be, like I said, there are different color schemes in calcite for success, like the green and that. And then we want to distinguish like a simple info message in that versus the actual result, the data coming back. And at the bottom, we have a progress one. So if it's progress, we want to go update the interface in that with a different value. Now there's a line up here that was different before where we actually go get the progress bar in that. I'm not going to go over in detail the styling and the HTML for the progress bar. That'd be like another video. But what we want to see is the ability to run different functions inside the worker, right? The worker send different messages to us, and then us, responding. Hey, if it's info, we do it one way. If it's warning, we do it another way. If it's progress, then we've got a progress bar we want to update, and if it is a result, and that. Now. I might have to take 2 runs. When I fire this off, it is going to be probably launch off screen, and I'll try to grab it as quickly as I can if it shows up so that you can see it. Okay, and so you can see my progress bar happening. The jitter there is the little sleep for 50 seconds, and that. And so we can see that we got a whole bunch of messages back. So let's go into the console and inspect that. And let's go to the console here. And notice when we got a warning message, our logger, instead of doing a log or a dir, does a warn, console.warn. And so we get these different messages, right? And that sort of thing. And we get the event message and that. Oh, well, this is out of the logger. So it was type warning, and there's no function or method named hello. Oh, look, little typo, because in our worker, if we go look, it's a lowercase h, and this one, right? Probably the same, but we don't have, there is no function or method with the name junk, right? So our worker can tell people, hey, I've got lots of stuff, but nothing with that name, but it doesn't blow up or cause an error, right? That sort of thing. We'll get these rolled up and that. And then we have a thing about like object detected, right? And these are the event messages, info, start processing. Almost done, right? Success, right? And then data. Look at that. And there's the data with the adjusted values, because we sent over, I think, minus 123.49.5. And so we were able to send data in. It was able to adjust it and send it back. And so if we do a refresh on this, you'll see the progress happening in that. And near the end is where a whole bunch of messages come in. So we do have some added complexity to this sample, but now we can do a lot more things. We can talk to our worker. It can send us lots of different messages back. We can kind of parse out what kind of message was that and do different things on the interface in that. Little built-in robustness in our worker to warn that, hey, we don't have a function with that name. So there's not much that we can do about that. So that basically concludes this video in that. And again, this is part of a quick 3 video series, or not so quick, depending on your perspective, that just builds from a simple worker to messages going back and forth to that Play-Doh where we're almost mimicking the web worker framework that exists in the API, but we're doing it with a raw worker, which does help the build process in Vite and that. That's all for now.